Hello there, my name is Chad Ford, and I'm going to be doing my persuasive speech on skiing and snowboarding, and mostly why skiing is superior to snowboarding. Apologize about that. Okay, a little bit of a blizzard on the way in this evening, but yes, skiing and how it's superior to snowboarding. Um, well, first off, I'm going to start with a little bit of discussion about both sports. Skiing and snowboarding both enjoy great popularity in the U.S. and around the world. They're both gravity-fed, adrenaline-fueled sports. Big mountain, lots of snow, equals lots of fun. Both sports are in the Olympics. Skiing was introduced in 1924 in France, while snowboarding came a little bit later to the party in 1998 in Japan. In fact, the next Olympics in 2014, there'll be a new event for snowboarding called Snowboarding Cross, which is like a hybrid of a downhill obstacle race with a bunch of other competitors. Lots of fun to watch, but new sport in 2014. But yes, they're both gravity-fed, downhill sports, widely popular, like I discussed. Yet I want to discuss some of the differences between skiing and snowboarding, lay out some of the technical aspects of the two, different learning curves, different equipment involved in them, and then also just some of the different terrain and different disciplines you can do with each sport. Starting with skiing, I'm going to cover actually I'm going to start with the equipment involved in skiing. Three main components. You're going to need your skis, of course, come in a variety of shapes and sizes depending upon your skill level, what you're looking to do, be it the terrain you want to ski, and then just also based upon your height, this is going to be different sizes and that type of thing. Next one is the boots. The boots, of course, click into the skis. Boots are hard plastic designed to protect your feet and ankles, also to prevent movement of them so that you can manipulate the ski to where you want to go. The third piece of equipment are your poles. Poles are basically used for balance and to help you turn while you're skiing. Of course, you want to size these correctly. Any type of options that you can have with your equipment, of course, you want to deal with a ski shop or rental equipment company to help guide you in the right direction of what equipment to get. As far as the technical aspect with skiing, some key things you want to use and practice while skiing is body posture. It's very important. You want to keep your knees slightly bent, keep your weight balanced over the middle of the ski. You want to keep your heels back in the boots, so that means you're going to be that helps with the bending of the knees, helps push your heels back into your boots. It helps you know if you have proper form. Like I said, helps keep your weight balanced over the middle of the ski. Head up, it's very important. You want to see where you're going. I know it kind of sounds like a no-brainer and kind of a foolish thing to say, but lots of people get stuck looking down at the tips of the skis, not where you're going, and that's where you can get into a lot of trouble with either running into other skiers or snowboarders or possibly even trees, which is definitely not good. And then the last thing, your arms. You've got the two poles. You use those for balance. You want to keep them out lateral to your body, help you balance during your trip down the mountain. So it's kind of some little technical aspects of it. There's different forms as far as keeping your feet together, going for style points and that type of thing. Those are more advanced moves. Moving on to snowboarding. We're going to talk a little bit first about the equipment required for snowboarding. You basically have two key components versus three with the skiing. Those with the snowboarding being your board, of course. Different shapes and sizes, just like your skis with snowboarding, depending upon what type of terrain you want to snowboard. And of course, your size, weight, those types of things, and how aggressive of a board do you want, your skill level, basically. The other equipment component are your boots. Just two items really. The boots are rigid, firm boots, a little bit softer than the ski boots, but still designed to immobilize your feet and ankles so that it allows you to have nice control of your board. Be able to have that tactile feel of the ground underneath you. Then as far as the technical aspect, kind of similar to the skiing. You're going to have your knees slightly bent, back straight, head up. The motion's going to be different. You're going to be going in a lateral direction versus forwards. So you're going to be turned, so then you have to determine what foot you're going to have in front, your left or your right. Typically having the left foot in front is more common. That's termed a regular stance. Whereas if you have your right, if you're more comfortable with your right foot forward, that's termed a goofy stance. So basically you figure out which one you feel more comfortable with, and that's the one you go with. But otherwise, knees slightly bent, heels back in the boots, keep your balance over the board. With snowboarding, you only have one edge to turn with versus skiing where you have two. So as far as the technical aspect, your turn's going to be a lot wider and just more serpentine versus skiing where you can get more aggressive in your turns. Especially learning right off. You can turn a lot tighter and be more maneuverable versus snowboarding. And your arms, once again, lots of times you'll have those out laterally to help keep your balance while snowboarding. So those are just some of the technical aspects. Pretty similar to skiing versus your stance, but basically your approach and your motion is going to be a whole lot different from snowboarding to skiing. Next we're going to talk about terrain and what types of terrain can be maneuvered with skiing and snowboarding. I'm going to start with skiing. Skiing, you can do your typical downhill, point the tips downhill, take off type skiing. There's other types of terrain like moguls. Moguls are basically natural obstacles that are formed after a long day of downhilling. The skiers' turning motions naturally form these mounds of snow called moguls that become kind of packed and become like very large speed bumps. I guess is about how you can term them. There's a technique for maneuvering moguls. So it is a type of terrain that is formed naturally from skiers doing downhill. The next type of terrain are trees. Trees are a lot of fun. You can maneuver. It's tight terrain. Maneuvering in and out of the trees. Definitely recommend wearing a helmet. It's a safety tip for the day, kids. When you're in the trees, it's very likely that you would strike one, so definitely make sure you're wearing your headgear. Cross country. Cross country is more of a flat terrain versus steep vertical, so it's more of an endurance where the skiers can be propelling themselves forward with their legs and their arms to get their motion rather than relying on gravity to propel them. Powder is usually more fresh fallen snow. It's more fluffy, not compact snow, so you kind of float and glide through the snow. A lot of fun. Terrain park. Terrain park is going to involve more creative tricks, freestyle, imagination, jumps, rails, those types of obstacles to entertain yourself with. The next part I'm going to talk about is snowboarding and its terrain. Of course, you have your typical downhill, just like skiing. Point your board downhill, take off. The next one would be powder. Powder is loved by snowboarders. Nice, soft, floating motion. Feels like you're floating on water. The terrain park. Terrain park, once again, you can express yourself, do whatever you like, tricks, jumps, rails, that type of thing. And those are pretty much the main types of terrain for snowboarding. The other types that differ that skiers like to do, moguls, trees, cross country, those types of things are not very conducive to the snowboard and the way it works. So those are the variances in the different types of terrain right there, those three primarily. Disciplines. There's a difference in disciplines versus skiing and snowboarding. I'm going to talk about some of the skiing ones first because there are more of them. You have the downhill, once again, going downhill. You've got the slalom. While you're going downhill, they'll slalom and ski between gates. So it's kind of it's a skill basically to hit each gate while maintaining a high rate of speed. Moguls, talked about that earlier, the naturally formed obstacles. There actually is a technique to maneuver through the moguls to see who can do it the best and the quickest. Telemark. Telemark skiing basically involves a different type of skiing where the heel of the boot is not attached to the ski, and so to be able to turn, the skier actually needs to bend his knee or lunge to be able to turn the ski. It's a different technique, different discipline of skiing. Cross country, mentioned that before, more flat surface. The skier actually moves their arms and legs to propel them across the snow rather than relying on gravity. Backcountry skiing, basically you either hike or you're towed by a snowmobile or even dropped off by helicopter into these backwoods areas where you can ski down virgin snow, lots of powder, great time. Definitely recommend having a GPS locator and an avalanche kit in case you are buried in an avalanche. You definitely want to be found and be able to get out very quickly. Freestyle, terrain park, tricks, jumps, rails, that type of discipline is another one that can be enjoyed by skiers. Switching over to snowboarding, there's fewer disciplines. You've got your downhill, mentioned that before, like skiing. You've got your slalom, basically skiing through the gates while doing downhill. And then backcountry skiing, the backwoods, dropped off by a helicopter, taken out by a snowmobile type of backcountry skiing. Freestyle, terrain park, this one is probably the most enjoyed by snowboarders, seems to be a big favorite. Jumps, rails, kickers, the half pipe, all those things are enjoyed by snowboarders. So it's 4 disciplines versus about 8, 9 with skiing. So a lot more disciplines to be enjoyed with skiers versus snowboarding. Moving on, we're going to learning curve. Different learning curves and aspects between the two sports. Skiing, I'm going to start with, it's usually easier to learn, easier for novices and newbies to pick it up and to actually enjoy their first day or two of skiing. Versus snowboarding, it's really tough on beginners. Because when you fall hard usually. There's a term called catching an edge with snowboarding, where with snowboarders you can only turn with one edge versus skiers where you can turn with 2. And snowboarding, if you're not balanced correctly and you get just a little bit forward, you catch that front edge and bam, you end up on your face quicker than you know it, and it is not an enjoyable experience. So snowboarding is pretty tough on beginners. As far as the learning curve between the two sports, the learning curve for skiing is much longer. So yes, you might pick it up sooner, but to become really proficient at it and very comfortable usually takes a little bit longer than snowboarding, whereas once you actually pick it up, you actually become better much faster, is the whole meaning of the learning curve. Longer learning curve for skiing, steep learning curve for snowboarding. Skiers can learn at a very early age. I've seen 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds out on the slope. I had my 3-year-old out earlier this year learning how to ski. Whereas with snowboarding, you really don't see the little young ones learning how to snowboard, just because of the whole different body style and movement that's incorporated with snowboarding versus skiing. The youngsters are much more adept at picking up skiing at a young age than snowboarding. Experienced skiers in both disciplines. Experienced skiers have many more avenues, techniques to pick up, different technical things to work on and improve upon, different avenues, telemarking, learning moguls, different terrains to enjoy versus snowboarding, where they're pretty limited. Once you become proficient at it, don't have much else to advance in unless you're interested in hurling yourself off of a jump at insane speeds and vertical distances and doing all sorts of aerial maneuvers, which I would say the majority of the population in the world is not that interested in doing. They wish they could do it, but people have careers and families that they provide for, and so eating up a vegetable is not too desirable. So basically, for experienced skiers and snowboarders, there's many more technical aspects and avenues for skiers to enjoy versus snowboarders. So as far as learning curves and lifetime longevity of the sport, skiers seem to have many more ways to enjoy the sport versus snowboarders. Skiers are able to pick up the sport earlier, whereas snowboarders, it's a little window you got to get into where, maybe 7 to 8, actually 5 to 7 snowboarders usually start picking it up, and then people are not as apt to pick up snowboarding later in life than skiers. Skiers start skiing when they're 50, 60 years old. Skiing is a more natural form of movement, so it's much more attractive for people to pick up. Skiing can be enjoyed at any resort, whereas there are still some resorts out there that snowboarding is not allowed and is banned. So you definitely, no hesitation, anywhere you go, skiing is definitely welcome. Skiing can be enjoyed in any conditions, on any terrain, in any day. So basically, anything you come across, skiing can handle it. With a little bit of patience, a little bit of learning, it can be conquered by skiing, whereas snowboarding, not all terrains and conditions are conducive to snowboarding. The big glaring condition or terrain being a flat surface. Snowboarders cannot do it. They have no way to propel themselves unless they detach themselves from their board and push themselves along with one foot, maybe their arms on the ground, or even I've seen them hopping back and forth, which usually doesn't last very long because it's a massive expenditure of energy. So whereas skiing, you just kind of skate along, propel yourself. It's very enjoyable, and I find that skiing is gonna give me great enjoyment throughout my life in any mountain I encounter and any resort I go to. And that's why I enjoy skiing so much more than snowboarding. And I want you to give it a try, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. I thank you for your time, and have a good night.